begin with chapter 3, which is one of the more difficult chapters actually of the book in my opinion, with all the associated files near it and everything associated with it. And we're going to have a few possible program Civil 3D glitches and compatibility if you have any version newer than 2019, which a lot of you do by this point, but we'll muddle through this. I'm going to do this in 2019, so this works a little more seamlessly, but some of these survey database files have been updated in Civil 3D version 2020, which will make a few of these exercises tough that have to do with the survey database files. So we'll start by downloading all of our chapter 3 lab files in our Moodle. Chapter 3 is going to be called establishing existing conditions using survey data. So when we open that file, it's going to look a little different. I have these numbered just for the sake of me staying in sequential order as I go through this plethora of files while I try to do a video at the same time. But you have all these files here, the complete versions to look, and a couple extra files, essentials DWT, and don't mind these files, these are temporary files while I have these AutoCAD files open, not to confuse you anymore. And then we have down here some Linework Code Set files, some figure prefix database files, some text files with some raw survey data. You wouldn't quite know what these are, but they are the Linework Code Set files and the figure prefix database files. They're definition files that go along with our Civil 3D survey database. These are survey databases. These will give you trouble if you have a newer version than 2019, but for all intents and purposes we'll be able to get through this. They have these inherent XML or generic type files in them that establish the survey database information outside of your DWG CAD file. The 2020 on, these files change a little bit, get a little more robust. This is something I think I created already and I might have to make elsewhere. Anyway, chapter 3 starting on page 57 is actually not 57 according to my PDF, but if you actually go to the book, it is a slightly different page. Don't mind my blue beam. It is actually page 37. This chapter we're going to learn about the function of survey data, which is one of the most key things in chapters 3 and 4, and that sets the foundation for design. We're going to learn about the survey database, what I like about it, what I don't. We're just going to learn about it in general. Importing survey data in a couple of ways. Automating field to finish through some files, which we're going to learn, the Linework Code Sets, the figure prefix database, description keys, and also using point groups, all 4 of them, to help automate from start to finish on our maps. And we're going to learn a little bit about surveying survey points and editing survey figures, and a little bit about creating and editing COGO points. So survey points and COGO points, we'll learn a little bit about what makes them different. So what is survey data? We're going to start out by going back a notch on 38 for a more description. They're basically little dots that were surveyed or could be surveyed in the field theoretically to a real-life 3D model with elevations and horizontal and also vertical data. So if I go outside of my files for the class and I go to some maps I've done, here's one in Washington State. So our survey data is what makes up these maps. It's in the background. If I click on some of these things like these COGO points, they are individual points with a purpose that were shot in the field that have geospatial data, horizontal X and Y, or northing, easting, or Latin long, and an elevation Z. Now I have most of them turned off in various ways to display this final map of this rail yard in its pretty form with a surface and contours and these contour labels, and many of these COGO points are changed by description keys, which dictates how they display. We'll learn later, in how they look. So most of this survey data, if we look in the background of this map, let's just turn on a few things quick, just for showing you here quickly. Let's turn on, make sure all points in the point group is to the top. I'm going to hit OK This map's going to get a lot more busy all of a sudden. And here's all the COGO points that were shot in the field to produce the good majority of this map actually. Let's change the scale down here in our toolbar down below to 1 inch equals 5 feet. These are our shots that were done in the field. These are our COGO points. They were brought through the survey database. The line work was a lot of times automated, and so was the appearance of a lot of these points through description keys and various things we're about to learn about. So this just didn't happen magically. A lot of this is at a company of my own that quickly is able to produce said plans a little more automatedly, so there's less manual drafting to connect the dots, to change symbology, to change symbols, to add symbols, and basically just make a map a little more automated from raw field data. We see here in this map on this hillside in Montana, this is a final completed form. It has a lot of surface data that comes from a different source, but it has a small amount of features, a road and a ditch and a culvert in here, and some control points, which we'll talk a little more about later, and some trees I found with scan data. But control points are a critical piece of any survey, in that they are what controls how all the other points' accuracy is reflected from. They are where you survey from, correct your data from, all the data runs through, whether it be a total station or GPS RTK survey setup. They are very critical, and where they're placed, how they can be accessed in the future, if they are very permanent entities to be found and used again, all comes into play in the accuracy and the type of map we want. One more map here from an older version of some work files I have without a surface. And the end goal is to make a nice 2D and 3D topographic map to be designed off of, to be displayed, or whatever purposes we might have in the real world with real world geometry and coordinates. Now, there's a lot of ways to help Civil 3D automate that as we start into our first exercise. So we're dealing with survey data. We're going to learn how to use the survey database. There's many things to quickly automate with the survey database. There's also some ways I'm going to show you how to do quicker imports when you don't want to use a survey database. You can go bounce between the two. So if we get on to exercise 3.1 on page 40, we're going to start with this essentials DWT. Sometimes when you open DWTs, they open as DWGs and they'll just say drawing 1. That's nothing to get frustrated about. That's how sometimes templates, AutoCAD templates, which are DWT files, will open like that, so you don't accidentally edit the template. So that's just a protection they have, but I actually have the DWT open. Now if we look back in our files, it is this file here that you also download. It won't have the one at the beginning. That's just for me to quickly find it as I do these videos faster. So this is the file in your Chapter 3 lab files you'll be looking for. So we're going to start by going to the Survey tab in Toolspace. Toolspace is our home base for most things Civil 3D we've been learning. We're going to go to the Survey tab, and we're going to start by making our working folder known. You have to change this between jobs. When you switch jobs to different areas in your file structure, you need to change this, much like data shortcuts when you go from project to project needs to be changed too. So let's set our working folder and see how this works with my, not remote drive, I have a hard disk drive, but let's see how this handles. I might have to transfer some files to my C drive, but I hope not. So I just sped this up because AutoCAD in its infinite wisdom wouldn't find shortcuts, so I had to drill down about 15 levels to find where I wanted to go. Go to the header folder. You'll go to Chapter 3 lab files. I went down one level because I like to keep these files alone and I edit these video files. So you go here, but I'm going to go here. Now it opens up my survey databases. I already made a project at the beginning here, which we're going to get into in another step. And we'll do that in a second, but these are the survey databases that come with the files, and there's files within them. Now I should be able to open them for edit. Let's find out real soon. I can. If you're in Civil 3D 2020 or newer, these will all error out with warnings on the side. So just bear with me. In some of those areas you can skip and turn in your labs without doing exactly everything. I'm going to close this survey database. So that shows that these files are compatible. I'm in Civil 3D 2019, which helps. If you're in anything newer 2020, that will not work, what I'm about to do. So one area of the upgrade of files that aren't compatible are survey database files. So we're going to right click, we'll say new local survey database now. We're going to type in essentials. We'll hit OK or enter. That's going to open up here in a second. There it opened up in my survey database. And there's really nothing else to modify the file. It was just showing how to create a new survey database is all. So we've done that. We're ready to do next steps. We're going to leave this file. Let's go to our next file I'll already have open here, which is the file import survey data. So look for this. It won't have the numeric in front. This is just for me to keep these in order. It'll just be called import survey data. Once again, in your Chapter 3 lab files. So it'll be like right here, but without the numeric in front like I have. So let's start by importing some survey data through, it says in this case, the Home tab. We're going to go Home tab and import survey data this way. That's the way they want us to do it. There's also other ways to do this, but we're going to do this. Give it a second. It's going to bring up the initial survey database. So it's not showing that, so let's hold tight here quick and hit cancel. So it's not really following its own steps well, this book already. Let's go to set working folder again. Because we're in a new file, we need to do this again. And I'm going to pause quick and get to my file fast. I'll reopen in a second. Alright, starting back up. So let's go restart this command again, import survey data. Now they should be linked up. So I'll hit cancel. What I had to do was, like I did in my first file, my essentials, I had to set my working folder to the exact folder first, okay? These have to be shown open and ready to go. Open for edit. So until this is done, you won't be able to get to them this way easily. So once again, I link them, which is very confusing. Just go with it. But Chapter 3 lab files, this is my home base folder. Now it's finding all of these survey database folders and what's inside of them. Okay, that's exactly what's happening here. Alright, so let me minimize my Windows Explorer, and we're going to go and open for edit Essentials 1. You might have problems with this because if you need an older version of Civil 3D. And we're going to go to the next step here, and we're going to import survey data, which you can do this way. Right click and import survey data this way, or you can go through the book and say create survey data, import survey data here on the Home tab. Give it a second. It wants us to go to the Essentials 1 survey database. We'll hit next. It wants us to go to a point file, and we'll hit the plus sign. Take us. We got to do this all over again. Find where it is deep buried in my primary drive here. Good thing this time I can go to my shortcut to speed this up. Into my class files, labs. Yours will probably be in this folder. Chapter 3 lab files. Mine's going to be one deeper for the video. We're going to select point type. We're going to page 42, and we're going to pick this topo survey text and hit open. Now there's many different file types, so when we hit this, This point file could be land.xml is a universal file. Points from drawing, if the focal points are already in here, we use the survey database to automate on top of them. We have no points in here already, so we got to bring them from somewhere. Now we hit plus here again. There's a few different types of survey data sources, which is also on page 42. Most commonly, people use CSVs, XYZs, or text files for simplified point files, sometimes land.xmls, but in this case we're using the TXT, simple ASCII file. Let's make sure we get this format right. This is very easy to screw up, and I'll explain what the acronym means in a minute. So P means point number, E means easting or in the X direction, N means northing in the Y direction, Z means elevation direction or the Z dimension, and D means description or raw code description. We want PNEZD comma delimited, not space delimited. And this is a very standard format in a lot of civil engineering and land surveying. And we see how they come up here. It's a quick preview. PNEZ or point elevation, D description. Go to next. We don't want to do a survey network as far as I know. Let's expand this out. And let's see what they all want us to do. So in import, let's make sure for sure we collect this. That is key. Okay. And verify that this Linework Code Set is on sample, and also my figure prefix database is on sample. This is our only options. There are default figure prefix database and Linework Code Sets. Those aren't really great ones, but that's for the purposes of this exercise. We're going to see that these don't automate and connect our dots necessarily. So that's the main thing. And just hit finish. Your data is importing. It looks like it did already. I double clicked my center mouse, or I can type in Z, zoom. Come on, Civil 3D. Extents E. Let's start by going to View. Let's go down to one single window for now. I'm going to say Control A to select all. So I have something in here, but it is not what I want. Should we try this again? Inserting points into drawing. There we go. I don't know why they didn't come in the first time. If you had problems like I did there, you can re-click them. I saw this was populated. This text file was imported. I said right click, insert into drawing. Now I found them. I'm maybe typing in regenerate, R-E-G, or regen all, or regenerate, one of these two commands might have kicked it AutoCAD in the butt and told them to regenerate this graphically. There's never a day when AutoCAD doesn't make weird errors like that, so just get used to it being a little glitchy on some of this stuff. And that is it on this example. So we just imported some survey data through the database. Mine looks a little different than the book example. You should have been able to do zoom extents and it brought it in just fine. So let's go to page 44. I'm going to undo this a couple of times. And sometimes with AutoCAD you can undo many commands, because AutoCAD, also in its infinite wisdom, decided to make a pan, zoom, and any movement. Anytime you move the screen, it counts as 2 to 3 undo, redo action items, which you quickly learn they populate fast on here. So that's not a fun AutoCAD item, but something to get used to and to undo a lot of things all at once. Now, if this doesn't crash, which Civil 3D a lot of times doing undo redo is a very good way to make it crash in my experience. It didn't. I'm going back to one viewport. I'm going to show you a quicker way to import survey data, more quick and dirty without any too many bells and whistles. On page 44 it says there's another way. You can do insert, points from file, and now we'll search for that same point file in my chapter 3 files, TopoSurvey.txt. It should queue us up there because we've already been there. Yep. Open. Let's change the point file format, which is, we found out, important, how the points fall. It'll say if it doesn't like it. Also, don't be in this file while you try to import it. Don't have it open in a text editor. It won't like that. Little secret that will drive people nuts if they don't know that. Okay. There they imported without the full help of the survey database. They're already in here, and I can still, at this point, I could apply things to the survey database. If I go back to tool space, I could apply things to them. I could say import process line work, insert into drawing. I could take these points that are now in here and bring them now through the survey database backwards. But we won't do that in this example. We're going to keep talking about on 45 past, this is importing them without the survey database, automating field to finish. So now we're going to start to get on to automating, connecting the dots and the lines and the blocks. They look the way they want. They have the exact descriptions we want all filled out in here, and the description codes. We're going to start diving into some of those. So making a drawing out of data can be quite tedious, and has a ton of opportunity from this raw data collected by a field surveyor to automate the process once it's brought into the field. Once it's collected in the field, a lot of times it's only halfway done, and we need to make a pretty map out of it depending on our scope or our budget or our timeline, various 3 things of project management, or the final end result, what maybe needs to be designed off of. All kinds of things might determine how much mapping we do in the office to pretty up also the data we collect in the field, or how much data we collect in the field is a very big thing of the field person. When they collect the data, it needs to have good instructions and what to get, what to leave out. But now, the next couple sections we're going to learn how to better automate once we have this raw data. So I'll open up your Linework Code Set DWG, which is this drawing here. Keep in mind it doesn't have this numeric on. I did that for myself to keep them in order. Linework Code Set DWG, and we're going to start by going into the Survey tab on Tool Space once again. Keep in mind you might have troubles with this because these aren't going to work as well for you, but this is a good learning example, and if you can get a version of Civil 3D before 2020, that would be great to do this full chapter on your own like I'm doing it. So we're going to go to Essentials 2 Survey Database. We're going to right click, say Open for Edit. If you receive an error message here, you may have installed, not have the data sets installed correctly. You need to make sure you have all your files downloaded inside of these. Like this one, here's the actual file itself, or the folder, excuse me, and here's the files inside of it. I'm in it right now, so I have a few more files open than if I wouldn't been. I'll leave it out. It's now open for edit in the survey database here. Next step, we're going to expand the import events, and we're going to look at our topo survey was imported, indeed, like we left off in our last drawing. And we're going to click the properties of it up here. We're going to look inside of it a little bit. What did we import? And that takes a minute. We'll go inside the file itself. You can also open it in a ASCII, notepad, or any ASCII simple text editor. You can also open it this way. Didn't like that. Interesting. I did this in a later version of Civil 3D. Let's try. You might get that error. Hit cancel. Another great Civil 3D glitch. Let's open for edit. Let's try opening Essentials 1 for edit. Let's go to properties of this one. That one worked. Interesting. This is what the Essentials 2 should have done. So this is showing your COGO points, basically your raw field data. There's over 700 points, 715 to be exact, of our entire topo map. Anyway, you can get there also by going here and finding your file, topo survey, and double clicking it and opening in a standard text editor. That's just fine too. That's one way. Now, to look at some of these which we're talking about, it's saying to look at some of the codes a little bit, and some of these have further descriptors on them. Now this is the raw description code that says maybe edge of pavement, and it has a further code called a there's different terms for this, but it's an appending code or a additional line work code that might have a numeric code to distinguish this edge of pavement from another edge of pavement, called a numeric sequencing code or a numeric identifier. There's different agencies call these different things. This is additional code work to say this is the beginning of a line. This is going to help us in our line work code set to make the line the way it should be. And notice some of that. This one means end of line, and also something else with I believe beginning, end of curve, but it's the end of a curve and it's a polyline. Beginning of a curve. And these are spelled out in our line work code set. So we'll hit escape, and we don't want to save that. We'll link to the line work code set later. Now we'll close that. We're going to go into our survey tab, into this drawing on the line work code set, and we're going to go to our survey database user settings. Click that, and we're going to look at some of these. Well, we got to repath these because yours are going to be going to your default C drive locations, which isn't what we want for this chapter by the end. We're going to start with the line work code sets path. We're going to one at a time, which is right here, line work processing defaults. And those codes, we're going to change this. And we're going to set the path to our chapter 3 folder as well. So let me pause again so I can get there so you don't have to watch me do this slowly. Alright, I'm back, and I just basically went the same spot. Go to your chapter 3 lab files. I'm going to my video ones, but you will go here. Hit OK. We now better path to our line work code set path. We wanted to find these files here. Okay. It's all of these files. That's what we're trying to make it find. Alright, the line work code set files. And let's just hit OK to accept that one. Now we'll go down here in the survey database. Let's cascade some of these down, our survey databases. Let's cascade this open. So now it found them. Okay. My figure prefix to databases, that'll come later. Now we want to go to take off our old junky sample one that doesn't do much for anything. It's just a default one. And you might have to hit refresh on this possibly to queue it up, but I didn't have to. And go to Essentials and select Make Current first. Now right click and select Edit. We're going to look inside of this line work code set. So some of these coding operators and special codes are detailed in this line work code set, how these codes work and how they segment and curve, and different operators make them perform different tasks. So code delimiter space automatically starts there. Special code that begins a line or a curve. Continue continues it on. End closes a polygon. Horizontal vertical offsets, stopped offsets at certain amounts. Recall point, that goes back a point. Connect point connects any point to another point if you specify which points. This draws a rectangle from a point. This turns to the right, etc. etc. So these are curve segments. We did have some of these: begin curve, end curve, make a circle on a point or around that point. And this would be OC, a point continue as it makes a curve on that curve. So this is the nitty-gritty of our line work code set. We'll hit cancel, and Now we're going to go back into our survey database Essentials 1. I know it said Essentials 2, but that was not working right. And we'll say right click and we'll say process line work on our topo survey. Give it a second. And make sure the current line set, it didn't pick this up. It's interesting. I set it as current here, but here it's still wanting to go to sample. So make sure Essentials is picked. Yet another Civil 3D glitch. There's many of them all the time. Say yes to figure objects. That's the biggie. And also that Essentials is picked. Hit OK. It should automate the line work. Give it a second. It's thinking down here, inserting survey figures. There they go. Now we have some line work automated vis-a-vis how the codes connect with our Linework Code Set. So we're going to continue on. We're going to talk about point styles. And this is a simple point style. It's an X. It looks like this. It's point style. You can tell it right here. It's also called standard. We have many other point styles we could change this to. I just changed it to a guy pole, for example. This defines, and point groups have a big impact on this, but this defines how our point looks. I'll change it to a sign this time, or better yet, let's change it to a tree. There we go. And we can also change its point label style to some kind of label on it. This is just elevation only. Before it had default. That lets the point group decide it. But now I just have elevation, so I can have a label with my Cocoa points too of a certain style. If I select this Cocoa point, I'm just a quick explanation of point styles and point label styles is all here. Let's change it to point number elevation description. Okay, so it has its point number, numeric, its elevation, and its full description, not its raw description. So that's a quick explanation on Civil 3D point objects. Point objects. We're going to move into 3.4 description keys. If you get into the description keys file, so it leaves off where we picked off on Linework Code Set Part 2. It is also in your files here. Description keys. Remember, it doesn't have the numeric, but open that one. And description keys basically, so they quickly, if we go to a different map that I've done somewhere else, a description key dictates a lot of things, but mostly how a point comes in, on what style, and what point style, Civil 3D, what point label style it comes in on, and also what layer it comes in on, which layer also gets controlled by point groups. They go hand in hand, description keys and point groups. So this point, my control point on this border map of Canada to the USA rail yard, this has a Cocoa point style of DJ&A survey control point. I want it to look like this. This little triangle, I want it to show that it's a control point. So that's its style that controls it. If I select it, it also has, bear with its infinite speed, DJ&A control point number is its point label style. So I want these exact points that are named this raw code. This means it's a control point. Here is its full description, set 2-inch DJ&A aluminum cap. But this is its raw code. The field surveyors are coding this raw. Those numeric and alpha characters, mostly alpha. This dictates what it looks like, and our description keys help automate that. It also has a layer it's on. It's on a points control layer. It's on an AutoCAD layer, so these can be further controlled and isolated and frozen and turned on and off. So that's just an example of a real-life map and how exactly that is. This is a fiber optic raw data point or Cocoa point. It comes in with a very specific, with this raw code and this very specific point label style, utility fiber optic pedestal, and it has a point label style of point only, no symbol only, because I don't want a leader with a description here. I just want to see the symbol descripting this as a fiber optic utility box. Okay, So if we go back to our drawing at hand, description keys, we're going to start by going into Tool Space, Settings tab, and we're going to get to where the description keys are. We're going to go to Point, we're going to go to Description Keys, and we're going to go to Essentials. This is our only one. I have a different one in my work drawing, but this is our book one. And we're going to go to Edit Keys. We can edit these said keys, okay? Move them out a little bit. Our panorama as we open it. Let's move them out a little so we can see what's working in the background with our description keys. It is this raw code, anything with asterisk before this, so there can be stuff after, but it will grab anything before that with BLD building, and it comes in with this style, standard, this label style, default, which is fine. These will be controlled by point groups later. It comes in with this just full description format. It's more, I would probably have said building corner all the way there, but that's how the book's doing it. Comes in on this layer in AutoCAD, and everything else looks blank. But the description key, when it sees raw codes of these nature, does these things in this column, this column, this column, this column, and so on and so forth. So there it is there. Now it wants us to go talk to one right now, and let me cascade them by code one more time. So we got tree on the top. This is a tree point style. So it's basically getting me on one point. It's raw code. You can right click that one raw code. Not here necessarily. So let's cascade this down. Let me go back to Prospector. It's a little confusing in the book on this part. I wouldn't blame someone for getting lost. I've got all points. We went to points this way as well. Let's cascade raw description, it's saying. Let's cascade it again, so the alphabetical here. These are individual Kogo points. So it wants us to pick. Let me just grab, for better example than the book's saying, I'll grab everything with TR in it. I'm going to hold Shift and left data click, so I have them all selected. Let me cascade this up a little, and I'm going to right click them. I'm going to say apply description keys. I don't think anything happened, but what probably happened, if I didn't notice already, as these are our trees. So you can also right click this way, one individual point, and say apply description keys. Or I could select said Kogo point and I could change it to a tree. But what I failed to do, so this is where these kind of go hand in hand, I still have this tree. These come in as standards, so they are doing their job. So let's change it here, point style to tree, and I'll hit OK. And let's cascade. This is in my description keys editor that I went to a little earlier. Let me cascade that down. Now let me do one at a time. I'm losing my crosshairs. Another awesome AutoCAD glitch going on. And I will apply description key just to that one. There we go. That time it worked because I changed it in the description keys here. Now if I go back to tool space, and let's go back to all the points again. Let's grab all the trees with shift and left click, right click, and we'll say apply description keys to all of them. They all should change to trees. There they go. Okay. So I'm applying those codes. I'm editing them one by one. Usually these are all filled out already, like my work one I just showed you, but we just changed one and showed you the power of that. So now we're going to change one more thing in the description keys, just for the keys, the tree COGO points. I could just as easily, once again, turn this view to one view for this particular job. Move that over here. Let's turn this back. And now it wants us to change our point label style of our trees to, what does it want us to do? Description only. There. We'll hit OK. There could be also a quicker way, which, give me a second here. I could apply description key just to all my points in the entire drawing right here. Not in this one. I have to go to a point group. My only point group is all points, which is always has to be a group that is default to Civil 3D. To all points, since I made that change, I'll just say apply description keys to all. That might be easier than just isolating the trees. So it reapplied them all, and of course the only change I made was adding a point label style called description to only the trees. That's all I did. Right here in my description keys, okay? And that's what happened. Now these same labels can be moved out as leaders, etc. The last thing it wants us to change in just these tree description code is the format on all of them. If I'm reading it correctly, we're going to change the format to $1 inch, and these are pretty tricky. The $ is a special code that tells Civil 3D we want to use only part of the raw description in the full description, so it's plucking that $, plucking one space out of here. So that's all we want. It's adding a 1 in front of it. Let's see what that does. Go to tool space, all apply to all points, description keys. So we just changed basically the coding, how our labels come out, and that's about it. So on our next step, we're going to start messing with figure prefix databases, and I'll just go to that file right now, figure prefix database, which is number 4 there, this one, but you won't have the number as I've said before. And figure prefix databases are basically ways to automate line work, connecting the dots on a map really quickly. So the Linework Code Set from before handles how the field codes are translated into Linework commands. But what happens once those features are drawn? What layer are they drawn on? This is the Linework Code Set controls the automated line work, but the figure prefix database puts the lines on special layers and our layer symbology that we want. It also moves things onto 2D or 3D lines. 3D lines in a map like this are called break lines oftentimes. That's where the contours break on their defining features of the surface. They can be existing or design, but now we're just doing an existing map. So that's some of the power of the figure prefix database. So I just got to this drawing. We're going to go to the Survey tab within Tool Space, and we're going back into the Edit Survey User settings here, and similar to our Linework Code Sets right here, honestly, to speed this up, I can't copy paste that. I wish I could. I'm going to edit this path right here on the figure prefix database path. So I have it path. Make sure you path to your exactly where your chapter 3 files are here. Okay, all the ones you downloaded from Moodle. That's where you're going to path it to. So it finds these files. Okay. These are the files. The sample ones are the default ones. These are the big ones we want to find. Our Linework Code Set file and also our figure prefix database file. Those are the files it's looking for. I have it pathed now. I'm going to tell this to pick Essentials right now. And we'll leave the survey figure style set there. We'll hit OK. We'll hit OK. Might take a half an hour. It is Civil 3D after all. And let's cascade this down, cascade that down, and now we have some figure prefix databases. I already set this as my current. I could reset this one as my current, but I want this one, and now on Essentials, and I want to manage this one similar to description key sets. We're going to check it out, what's inside of the box. It's very slow. Figure Prefix Database Manager. So it's basically saying when I get lines on this code, I'm going to make it a break line 3D or a lot line no, and it's making it 2D or 3D quickly, and it's also putting it on a very specific layer. There's only these maybe dozen or so. My company I work at maybe, for example, has 100 plus of these. This one's a little more simplified, and it'll put it on these layers. So we're going to scroll down in the name column, and you just kind of see the difference of all the raw codes and what they are. So let's hit cancel on this, and let's go into the Essentials Survey Database 3 and open for edit. And we're going to process the line work of just this data right now. And once again, it did a awesome Civil 3D error thing, and it went back to its default sample. But it probably has a deeper setting telling it to do that. We'll make sure it's on Essentials. Okay, and also yes. Hit OK. Our line work should be changing to different layers now. Ideally, this all gets done at once, but we're doing it one step at a time to isolate it to show you the power of some of this stuff. There we go. So it did change some layers, which changed the symbology. There we go. This road changed to gray. This fence line changed to a fence. Essentially, we're just getting the data to look more the way we want. We're going to pick up where we left off on the end of exercise 3.5, applying a figure prefix database, which is going to end most of our talk about automating drawings, which a lot of exercise 3.3 through 3.5 and even some of 3.6 is going to be involving a CAD manager or a high-level designer. This is four pretty advanced topics to highly automate your survey data, basically to make it and manipulate it exactly how you want from field to finish, straight from raw data. So to end with that, we're going to start talking about survey figures. And a survey figure is a Civil 3D object. It's a program's way of representing a linear feature that has been defined by using survey data. So in this drawing where we picked up on exercise 3.5, these are survey figures. If we pick them, they're linear features. They show as survey figures here. They're basically 3D lines. They have 3D lengths and 2D lengths. The 3D length is always going to be longer, especially it has elevations or Z dimensions. So it doesn't have to have 3D or Z or aka elevations to it, but that's the whole purpose. It can have horizontal and vertical, or 2D and 3D. So you can see it's also picked here in my lower right hand window. They're basically like polylines on steroids. They have elevations and Z dimensions. They're essentially like 3D polylines, but we're going to talk more about them later. They have special characteristics that allow them to be edited certain ways in Civil 3D up here, and they're very much like feature lines, which we'll later encounter and this learning of Civil 3D with 2D and 3D properties and various ways to edit them. But survey figures are specific to survey data. They get linked in the survey database with survey points. So that being said, we're going to move to page 52 and talk about point groups. and move into the point groups file. Of course, it doesn't have a 5 at the beginning like I've said prior, but it will say point groups, and there's a completed one to check your work as well. Now, point groups are another way of managing large amounts of point data. The feature that it enables you to better sort your points. So your description keys, arrange them a certain way initially. And the way I prefer to do Civil 3D when I bring in raw data, I like to dial my standards in with the description key to what our field surveyors usually do, and things come in initially very well because of a description key. And then after that, I like to use point groups, which are also pre-set up in a good template or CAD manager performance. In your Prospector here, all points come in point groups. Now, we don't have many here. That's the way this drawing is. It's to represent we're going to learn a bit about them and make some. But in a well-developed template, you would have many point groups that segregate points into very specific attributes and codes, and the point groups further, even more importantly, depending on their order and which ones are on top of each other, dominate how points are shown. So if we go to, this is AutoCAD 2019, so I can get the survey database to work. Bear with me for a second. In my other drawings, in a more standard drawing from a work file of mine, we have different point groups in this given file. We go to tool space. Bear with the speed of my computer right now. If we go to tool space, and Prospector, and we go to point groups, you can see all the different point groups I have here with different monuments and types of topo and types of utilities that all populate, and each of them inherently can have a point style, how the point appears, and a point label style, how the labels appear on it. So this given point here, this fiber optic utility box, has a point style, this Kogo point. It looks a certain way. You can see on there it has a number, a style, which is DJNA utility junction box, yada yada yada. It comes in a certain layer that's already driven by my description key set automation. It has a full description and then its geometry data. But at the end, not the end, the point label style doesn't appear to be on this one. So it comes a certain way, and my point groups greatly dictate that. So this drawing kind of shows a completed form. Let's go back to my point groups file, and we'll continue on with that on page 53 in the Prospector tab. Let's make sure this is out a little bit. So we're going to go back to, we have not much going on here. We're going to right click and say new. We're going to make a new point group. And in the information tab, when it comes up, my stuff's running a little slow today. We're going to call this one buildings. We're going to keep, let's see, we're going to keep the point marker. There's many different options here in our AutoCAD Civil 3D 2016 learning files, but we'll keep that as basic. And we're going to keep this to, change this to none. This is its point label style, how the label looks. After that, we're going to go to the raw description matching tab, and we're going to check the box saying which one do we want it to highlight. We're going to want this building with the asterisk. So anything before the asterisk, if it has BLD in it, will be included. So it also populates it here when we select it here. Okay, so let's hit at that point. You can hit apply if you want to accept that and keep editing more and more. But if you hit OK, it also is like apply, but it closes the box at the same time. So keep that in mind in Civil 3D as we keep learning. So now we have a point group that contains all the BLD raw description points. So it populates down here. Okay, here they all are. You can see they're locked because they're grayed out, and they're in the survey database by this little icon. If you bring in points differently, they won't have this icon through the survey database, and or they might not be locked. We can unlock them this way, and usually you can tell. Let's try to do an update as a right-click command. I'll probably have to unlock them through the survey database tab to get full editing capability, which, depending on how your CAD standards are set up, sometimes companies like to have them locked like that to prevent editing of your original untouched data. So now we're going to just make some more point groups by right-clicking and saying New. And we're going to make a break lines group. So all the break lines, we're going to do similar, basic, and none. And we're going to include, we can do the raw descriptions matching. This will help us do this a little faster. We'll select this one, bottom of ditch, bottom of bank, swale, which is like a ditch, TOB, which is top of bank, coding. This is just assuming some places CAD standards, top of ditch. These are all things in the field that would be mapped as like break lines of features to a map that the contours would break on. That's what a break line means. It's a defining feature that makes topography, basically. Hit OK on that. There's a lot of other things we can do with point groups, but we're just going to make these one at a time. And our next one's going to be roads. We're going to add raw codes when this comes up for roads, and maybe it didn't come up. So this one is going to be called roads, and same deal, keep the basic point style. Let's leave it to none for each group as we go on. And this is the step 6 on page 53, or at least in my in exercise 3.6 step 6. You could have slightly different pages in your electronic file, and we could also type them in here, but you have to type them in exactly. I prefer to go into raw description matching, so this gets them a little easier. As long as your description key set is built out that drives this, you'll be better off. So center line of road, driveway, edge of pavement, edge of shoulder, which is shoulder is like at the farther edge of gravel edge of a road, to just let you know what that means. I'm going to make yet another point group. This one just came up because it was still going in the background because my CAD's going so slow. Basic, none, edge of shrub, tree line, and trees. Say OK. Let's see if that happens again, because I was clicking it a lot. I don't think so. So I got a few point groups going now. If we click these, we should have things populating underneath here. See? You can also open the panorama by right-clicking Edit Points, and that will open up the panorama, which will be a separated box. If it's taking a minute, it opens up so it splits off from this area of tool space, that you can have it out or drag it to another screen. And hide, auto hide, here's the same thing that you're seeing in the bottom of your properties. So there's the points in that given group that you have segregated out, okay, from the survey data. So right click and do two more. We're going to do fences, and we're going to do ground shots. Ground shots is a pretty typical group because it gets added to define a lot of surfaces. Ground shots are like filler shots that triangulate in the gaps on a surface. We'll say raw description matching fences with OK. That one's built. And the very last one will do the same. Sometimes you have to hit update or refresh sometimes on this to kick AutoCAD in the butt, or Civil 3D to tell it to repopulate. Similar in the tool space, you might see a triangle with an exclamation mark in yellow, that means it needs to be updated in certain Civil 3D objects as well. Not for points as much. And GS for ground shot. Also, like I said, draw it, and you could do this manually, type it, but it did that for me, so that's good. Now I got all my point groups made I want. A bunch of stuff going on. That hopefully, you know, in a good template, this might be set up to pull these in already and they all populate without you having to do this every time in every drawing. This is just showing you how to do some of it manually. In a lot of complex drawings, you might get some miscellaneous shots that surveyors had to get creative on the coding. You might need to make a new point group. You might want to isolate them the way you prefer to draft or map, and so you can check through your data in a certain way. There's a lot of reasons to make your own point groups on given jobs. We're going to continue going into step 7 and go into settings. We're going to go point back to the description key sets with our essentials, and we're going to right click and we're going to say edit keys again, the description keys. What does it want us to do this time? It wants us to hold the shift key down and select all rows except the last one, which is trees. So it's really the top one here. I'm going to click that one, left data click, and hold shift and left data click that one, so I have them all selected. And I'm going to right click the style column heading, so right here, right click it, and I'm going to select edit right here, a little bit deep in the matrix here, and we're going to change everything except for trees. So these are on a lot of default, which is how they came in, but now we're going to, instead of standard, excuse me, on the style, not default, we're going to call them default. Sorry, that will take them to their given block, probably is our goal here. We'll hit OK. Okay, style and point label style. So by going to default here, we're saying we don't want you, description key set essentials, to dictate how our points look. We want you just to do the format here, how they're the full description, and put them on their given layers and identify them. But when we put default, that says it gives mostly full control to the point groups to dictate how all these given raw code survey shots, point style and point label style will turn out. That's essentially what we're doing. We're going to hit the green check box. Let's just see how this turns out. And I'm going to green checks back, turn that back off. So let's go back to the Prospector tab in our tool space. Remember, tool space, if you lose those things, you go to home, turn them on in here, tool space, survey tab, settings tab. That's how you turn it back on, or type them in the command bar. And we're going to go to the all points group. We're right click, and we're going to say, let's reapply the description keys I just edited. Give it a second. Let's see if this works. So it did appear to work, at least in this view. You can see, at least in this view, most of the points change from an X marking to circle markings. So you can see in this view, let's zoom in here. You can see it if you zoom in. So it changed all the markers to this type of point style, so you have to zoom in a little bit to see it. And also in this view, you could see it a little quicker in the lower right. So that's what happened there. Now we'll go back to the ground shots point group, and we'll right click, and we're going to select properties, In the information tab, when it comes up, it's really slow right now. I'm going to change the default point style to appears it wants to do elevation only. Let's just go with that, and I'll say yeah, that's it for that. So give it a second. We'll notice what happens to all the ground shots, which is the majority of these shots. They all change to elevation only readout or point label style. Zoom out here on the far left viewport. So that's essentially what we did there. Now we're going to output some data. We'll go to the output tab of our ribbon, and we're going to go to export points, which is right here. At least in Civil 3D 2019 it is. Look forwarding ribbon in a different version. It's in this area. And it's going to bring up a dialog box. Most likely yours will go faster. And we're going to tell it some things. We're going to say what type of entities we want. And first we're going to say limit points to a point group. It doesn't really say much of what type to do, but I'm going to show you what to do here, at least what I would do. We're going to limit it to just the roads we want. Let's take it like I said, mostly it's the PNEZD, or the most common point, northing or Y direction, easting, aka X direction, Z or elevation, and description. So we're going to say common delimited in that regard, and we're going to say our folder where we want it to go, which you can just choose your Chapter 3 folder. I'll go scroll to it here. So I scroll to my Chapter 3 lab files, and I'm going to call the file name road points, and it's going to be a text type file. That's its destination. We'll say open, and no adjustment. We'll just hit OK. It exported those out. Let's go see what it exported. I put mine in a special video folder just so I can have my one file stay the same. It should have exported roads. Looking for them. Oh, there they are. So let's open them up. And I exported all these points in the PNEZD format, you can see, and they're delimited or parsed out by commas. Okay. That's essentially it on that chapter. So take a look at the description keys complete if you want as well. And I am going to close this out here for now. Point groups versus description keys. So the important difference is a lot of times description keys, you know, initially when you bring things in, you hopefully have that set up to control the point style, point label, and layer of a point. And you can later change the order, how the points look later with your point group. These can also be set up in a template, preferably. And the priority of these from top to bottom control how these are shown. So I like to use the description keys in my CAD management to initially turn the data a certain way, and then my point groups to further edit the data and move it around and segregate it and split it up in certain ways. So they work hand in hand. That's just some things about them. Now, description keys I would rather use at the beginning, and point groups I'd rather have set up and further use them, edit them to parse out data after. So most of what you learn in pages 46 through 56 or 3.3 up to 3.6, like I said, are mostly experienced designer and CAD manager stuff to really automate your survey data. This I'm not going to require you getting too deep on these files, and a lot of your survey database stuff didn't work if you were in a version of newer than 2020. So I'll be a little forgiving on those files, but because the survey database between 2020 and 2021 don't talk to each other very well, the external files. So, but you know, descriptions you would make to your description key set, you would want to incorporate into your overall company template. So if you're editing this, you would prefer it to be how you edit data or map data all the time with your field surveyors, likely. That would be the most efficient use of it. And the same with your point groups. You'd want these to mostly populate every job. You're doing 90% of the same coding, and same with your field guys, field personnel anyway, that they're coding very similar on most jobs. That helps make things flow from field to final map a lot easier. So we're going to move to page 57 to edit survey points, which is a little different than COGO points. So we'll move into the edit survey points file now. And COGO points are depicted here physically in the drawing when you select them. There's many hundred in this drawing. I have one selected there. You can see it's a COGO point. Its properties come up. Survey points are only within the survey database, and they remain in the survey database. It's kind of like the unedited, unscathed, how do you say it? Sacred points, as they say a little bit on page 57, not modified in any way, the virgin, untouched, straight from the field data points. Now these are like that in Civil 3D. They use the power of Civil 3D to do that. The survey points in the figures, the survey points stay the same. A lot of companies like my own and others will keep this raw, sacred, or untouched and unedited original virgin data in a different program sometimes, like Trimble Business Center or Leica Geo programs. Sometimes it's done in Civil 3D in the survey database, but it is important somewhere in your chain of events from your raw data to have at least the original points in their peer form that came from the field. So you can edit them, but you do it at your own peril, and it's nice to have somewhere in your chain of events, which the survey database provides or other programs could provide, of exactly what you got from the field before you edit it after the fact, and you lose track of what you edited. So that's a little bit on survey points, excuse me, why they're important. So we'll go into editing into exercise 3.7, and it wants us to go to this red point over here on this tree line in this area. I lost my crosshairs there, they're back, and just wants you to select that COGO point. Okay, however you got to do it. And there's a typo in the raw description it's trying to say. I'm not exactly seeing it. There's two T's, I think, is what they're getting at, and it should just be TR. Yeah. So you can't edit the raw description here. It won't let you because how it's locked in the survey database in this type of drawing. It's showing you that's how this company wants it, for example. So because the data is stored in the survey database, we have to edit it there. So with the point still selected, click the survey point properties in the ribbon. So we got to go up here, since we picked this COGO point or survey point too. It's both. It's a little confusing, I know. It gives us heads up prompt for a survey point, and it wants us to select an option here in our contextual ribbon called survey point properties. So it takes us to the survey database mixed in with the COGO point, and now it should allow us to edit some stuff. It opens up the survey point properties, and now we can edit it to its proper raw code. So we did that, and we can hit OK. If you haven't already, it wants you to, go into Essentials 4, which you'll have a hard time doing in a newer version of CAD, a survey database, in this area of tool space. Let me cascade this down. Or we might try, watch your ribbon or your command bar. It tells you what to do oftentimes. It says select survey point object. Let me just indulge AutoCAD here for a second. I usually don't edit things this way. I'll hit OK again. So it did accept at that time. It's saying we're trying to get into a different survey database, number 4 here. Which I'm having nothing but problems with having this many files open, I think. I could maybe take a quick nap while I wait in between. That would be fun. For one, let me go back to hitting escape, and if AutoCAD doesn't make me take a nap again, I'm just going to go to configure viewport to 1. Let's speed things up a little bit that way to a single viewport. If you ever get a little bit bogged down in these drawings, it's always a good move. It gets a little bogged down with all 3 open on your resources. I'll just reselect it again. My edit's already taken place because I edited the survey point properties through this area. You can also, if I hit escape to unselect the point, you can access it through the survey database through survey points. When you click the survey points, you can access it in here and go to its properties this way and edit said point in that way too. So there's a couple ways, like a lot of things in Civil 3D. You can go through tool space or your contextual ribbon up here if you have the right item selected. There's usually a couple ways to get to things. That way is no different with a survey point. And now that I have all my windows closed down, I'm going to open Essentials 4 for edit. I don't think this matters anymore because I already did the edit. I could just show you on this point. Let's call it. It didn't say the same, that it prompted me to update the line work in the drawing anywhere. Instead, we could edit this point in 2 different spots, or 2 different ways. So let's do that. Come on now. So I got my Kogo point selected. Let's just see which one it is. It's point number 174. And in this survey database, since I opened another one, it is not corrected. So you can see it there. You can also just go in here and edit. Hit enter. Now it's dark shaded. Hit enter, or I can reload, and it's updated in my survey database. So I just went between 2 different databases. You can see I'd done one edit and I did it again, so I was bouncing between them. Let's have this still selected. Right click, and you can also pick one thing and apply description keys this way too, which will just turn it into a tree, because now you have the proper coding which recognizes just TR, not TTR. So it gives it the proper point style because we corrected it in the survey database. that's essentially it for 3.6. We'll move to 3.7, editing survey figures. So survey figures are almost the exact same as feature lines, which, like I said, we'll learn more about. They're 3D lines with elevations at each vertex that can be edited in Civil 3D in certain ways. So we're going to go to the Edit Survey Figures DWG, and we'll go into Essentials. I'll leave all three of these open for now. Let's say Open Edit to Essentials 5. You might have trouble with this in the wrong version of Civil 3D, but I'm showing you some of this stuff in 2019. At this point, we're going to look how to edit. So in the top right viewport, let's try that out. We're going to locate the building that is missing its north side. So I'll double click into this viewport. Whoops, selected too many things. So here it is here. Essentially you can verify some of it by selecting the line and say, yeah, it's a survey figure, it's a building. Okay, that's the one we want. And we notice that it's not closed the way we want. So I click the building figure line, and then the figure properties in the ribbon come up, contextual prompts, and it says 0.285 is missing a close code on one of the basically COGO points to close the figure. So we're going to click on 0.285, which I believe that's one of these two. When you click on 0.285, it is right here, and we're going to add something to that code to help it close. I'm going to try something different. I selected 0.285, and I had already clicked survey point properties, and I added BLD CLS at the end. Okay, space CLS. I think this might do it instead. The book's instructions I think are a little wrong on this. And let's say to refresh the survey points, let's start by going to view in one viewport again. This is really bogged down. It said, would I like to update line work as I turn my view to 1? I'll do that right now, otherwise I was going to have to refresh. I'll say sure. Okay, make sure that figure objects was selected yes. It should close this line unless I coded it wrong. It deleted the line work, now it's reinserting it. So you're saying that right there, inserting figures in. Really painstaking to do this one edit in that manner. So by me, basically, when I went to viewport configuration, it prompted me for rerunning the code. But when I selected this COGO point, I basically just changed the coding to do the right thing with the BLD space CLS at the end of it. So I just changed the coding of the COGO point by using the survey point properties to fill in the gaps and basically be coded the way that it wanted to do, so it would draft in a closed survey figure, which I have here. That's essentially the end of 3.7, just showing you one quick edit through, in my opinion, a little bit clunky survey database. Or excuse me, that was 3.8. There's a lot of other ways to edit survey figures. So when they come in like this, when you select a survey figure, you can edit the geometry, which edits horizontally how it is, and the elevations, which edits each node's elevation. and it all syncs with the survey database and the survey figure. A lot of times, most people in firms I've been at anyway, start with grabbing these survey figures, and they're usually really close like this. There might be a couple errors, and then they blow them up by hitting X, the X command for explode, and they explode these, and they turn them into 3D polylines, and then maybe feature lines from there. And they have a little bit better luck abandoning the survey database, and they take the survey database at face value, let it draft in the majority of the lines very close, 80-90% done, and then they blow them up to edit them quicker with Civil 3D commands or basic AutoCAD commands. So now, for example, this line, I exploded it once, it's just a 3D polyline, and I can edit it a lot more freely. I can just grab nodes, move them around. I might hover on a node and say remove vertex, or I might add a vertex. I might break these. I might drag them around the grips. I might break this line. I might even turn it into a 2D polyline by going to design, convert to 3D to 2D polylines, and then I give it an elevation of 0. There's a lot of things you can do, in my opinion, outside of survey figures. They're really slow, so I'm going to try the break command, BR for break, and I'm going to select this object now that it's a 3D polyline, and I just broke it. So this works a little quicker, doing your basic AutoCAD edits after you blow these survey figures up. In my opinion, the survey figures are a test to try to make this work, but they're a little bit slow and clunky. That's just my 2 cents to add on top of them. Now, the last part of this chapter, we're going to create some additional survey points called COGO points, and occasionally you need to create your own points to establish, let's say, key locations in a drawing. I'm going to go to the stakeout drawing while I'm talking about this and let it open. And what I mean by that is you want to show specific locations, let's say, of proposed curb or test borings, or proposed property corners that need to be found. Let's say you drew this whole boundary in this magenta based on a established survey record. You drafted it in with its bearings, distances, and exact to real world coordinates, maybe in a local system, but real world distances and bearings, and you're missing some things. You need to go to the field now that you've drafted in these property lines, as many surveyors would call dry labbing, or you're calking out the boundary from record. You go and you send a field surveyor or more into the field to find what monuments have been set to later mesh in with what you drafted in your records of the monuments they found or didn't find in the field to fit with your record as best you can. And maybe you hold the record better in other areas than some, but you take your drafting, your dry lab simulation, and then you verify it with your field data, which gives you your corrected final boundary in some respects, with a lot more that goes in the background in that. But that's one reason you might create some points. Take those said points at these vertices and export them out, give them to a field surveyor to put in their data collector to walk around in the field to search for these points. They'll be within a few feet rather than just guessing. When you're dealing with a mile or several hundred feet, you can guess how long it would take to find a really specific property corner without some help. It could take you all day. So that's some reasons a point file might be great. Now, we're going to be in a stakeout drawing, and the drawing contains a calculated property boundary, like I said, this magenta one, and it contains a preliminary layout of some roads in the middle here, which later in this book we're going to make into alignments and corridors and highways and or urban roads. But at this point, we're going to insert some points in the drawing just quickly without the survey database that represents survey corners located in the field. So we're going to go to Insert and Points from File off the Insert tab. And while that's loading, we're going to hit the plus sign to go find said file, and we're going to look for the found corners, which should be in your chapter 3, all your downloads. many files, and it's a txt file. We'll hit open. Remember not to have the file open or it'll error out, so close out. Don't be in the file while you try to do this. And we'll do p-and-ezd, common to the limited, which we're getting used to. And we don't need to put it in any certain area. We'll just say okay. It's bringing in these points. There's going to be some points it says they're going to want to override because there's matching points to what we already have in here. And that happens a lot. You know, when this kind of dialog box, when we have many different clients combining a bunch of survey points data, they'll have overlapping numbers. You'll have 2.100s, for example. That happens a lot in the real world. Many surveys from the same firm, let's say, for many years apart, and they didn't have the foresight to make them different point ranges. You just got to be a little creative to keep all the data you want. And in this case, we're going to say not overwrite. I almost never want to overwrite. I want to see how things go in there. So I'll say an offset from sequence from, I'll say 1,000. Let's add an offset to bump them up 1,000, point number up 1,000. And we'll say apply to all duplicate points. We'll hit OK. This way, all these points come in red, as you can see. My found property corners, and they came in with their point style, which is great. They pop. And I got them all in now. I didn't override anything, and I have some missing points. I don't have one here on this part of the boundary. I don't want to have one here. So we might want to send a surveyor out to go find those later. So in the Prospector tab, let's expand point groups. Here we go. And we'll go here and found corners, and we're going to select update. And it updated and added all those red ones, and it added the point label style, as you see. And we found some iron pins and some concrete monuments. That's just showing sometimes you got to kick Civil 3D in the butt to tell it to turn on. And we have those 2 points missing down here, like I said. Well, let's make some. We'll go to Home tab, to Points, to Point Creation Tools, dialog box open. And this has many different options, but we're just going to do one real quick in the miscellaneous manual. And we'll just start with this one. We'll hit the chevron button. I want to see some more options. So I'm kind of looking at some of the options in here. I expanded this out. It goes to vNode layer, points creation. It automatically has this selected as default description. A lot of times you have to put this in. I'll hit minus there, and you'll have to tell it which number to be. We'll just accept this number. This file's dialed in. I'll click this button to start making these points. Let's go in here. And let's make sure my OSNAP is turned on to endpoint. Okay, endpoint is running. And let me specify this location. My CAD is going so slow tonight. Let's do this again. These files are terrible at times, so let's try turning one viewport on once again. They can go at turtle speed with these 3 viewports open, as nice as they look and are pretty. I'm going to try that again. Seems to be helping me a lot. And let's rerun that point. Come on now. Literally want you to do one thing. And let's pick that node. And I have a point there. It's going really slow, but essentially added that point. We added a couple, one here, and at this point we're just going to export them. But first we're going to do the create points toolbar, and we'll go to tool space, point groups, say update to that, and it should show us. I made 4 of them by accident because I was clicking so much. That's fine. There's probably, and it turned in blue to their search point style. I made a few of them there because I was going so slow I couldn't tell what was going on. Anyway, we're going to make some more points after those ones. Those are displayed in blue, the corners to be found, which is a point group we already had in here in tool space. We said update to refresh that. Now we're going to make some points, bore descriptions at a certain interval. So we're going to go back to the drawing board on this. We're going to go to let's see, this area here on different intervals. But before we do that, we're going to say points creation. We're going to call these in this area bore. Let me minimize that. We're going to go back to how they're made, and we're going to say in this case an incremental distance measure object. So let's look for that. So if we go to the farthest to the left and go down away from manual, which we already did, we'll go to measure object. Now it wants us to pick one of the magenta road center lines. We're going to pick one of them here. I'm sorry guys about my CAD. It is sometimes one of the best programs in the world, and sometimes it is just terrible. Okay, literally on it, selecting it, and nothing's happening. Hit enter 1, 2, 3 times. That time I made way too many. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. Hit escape and then Control Z to undo that. So it was prompting me to do some stuff and I wasn't getting exactly the interval. So let me try that again. Create points. Measure object. Select it, hit enter. And I have it selected. We'll hit enter again. Okay, starting station 0, enter. Yes, I hit enter. Go, please. Offset of 0. And an interval here of 250. So that'll be key. We'll hit enter. Then we'll hit enter again. And they should look something like this. I was just having things go real slow with selection. My CAD's bogging down. I have too many files open. There's my points. Now that I have them made, we're going to go back to our tool space and our test borings. We'll hit update. Those that I just made at 250 foot intervals where our test borings will be were created because I made them by the raw code bore. Now we're all done. We could do that for the remaining road center lines, but just for sake of speeding this up, I'm going to end this with the last couple things. And on the output tab, we'll end this and say output, and we're going to export points. We'll call P and EZD, and I'll say corners to be found. And these are just going to be, well, it's in opposite caps. We'll limit it to this point group of those ones I just made, just those 2 blue points. We'll hit OK. And it's going to say, well, where do we want to put it? It's exporting the points right now. And the same thing we can do for exporting the points to, of the test borings, which there's going to be several more. So I hit export points again, and we'll say in this one test borings of those ones I just made, and we'll limit these to a point group of just the test borings of this format, point file format. We'll hit OK, and we'll let that go. And now we have, if we go into here, we created some, hopefully. They went somewhere, but yeah, they should have created a text file to a certain location. And oh, there's one of them. So it created a text file of the final points I exported of all these points I made of these bores at their certain point, style and label, and also these 2 blue property corners I want my surveyors to go find. So that's the end of this chapter, probably the hardest chapter in this book and the most convoluted. Now you know how to better import survey data into the survey database and display it, process points in Linework. You know how to automate things, which we won't expect you to do on any tests, but that shows you some of the power of that in Civil 3D, and additional methods to import and create points at the end. Next chapter, chapter 4, we're going to start importing a lot of this stuff into making a finished, or excuse me, existing ground map indoor surface.